Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the slavery grift industry, which is a huge industry, and just how it's put together and some of the structures and the architecture of how the globalist cabal are putting this together. It's a very big part of crushing white society and guilt tripping white people, shaming white people, creating social division. And this sort of instrument, the slavery drama is a perfect device for creating the sort of social division that the globalists need to prevent or stop or remove all opposition to the globalist project. So it's a centerpiece or part of the centerpiece of the globalist cabal, and we need to just look at the vast resources that are being placed at the disposal of this slavery grift industry. Now it starts at the very, if I'm looking for images about slavery, for example, every slavery depiction certainly that I see is white people capturing slaves, transporting slaves, beating slaves, that sort of thing. There's very few images that don't depict white people in a brutish sort of setting where you've got poor put upon black slave, always with some big chain around the neck and some heavy ball and chain around the ankle, and how they were supposed to do work looking like that. So they're all very dramatic and very propaganda-based depictions that are equivalent of any Marxist propaganda that used to sort of depict, women in chains, chained to the kitchen and things like that. So it's very much a propaganda depiction of things, and with scant resemblance to reality. Now you have to really hunt around to find examples of blacks enslaving each other, which was the biggest source of slave procurement by none. There was no competition to that. Every slave, pretty much, that were transported to the Americas and the Caribbean and so on, were slaves captured by other blacks, blacks enslaving each other, and also Arab slavers that were fairly big players, although the Arab slaves are more on the east side of Africa rather than the west side, but they were still players. The Berber Arabs that were still players down that west side rather of Africa. So white people enslaving black people directly was a minuscule proportion of the minuscule proportion of the slavery industry, and yet you'd think, reading the texts and having a looking at the propaganda type histories and researching the images online, you would struggle to find any depiction of any other form of slave procurement and so on. Now, the slavery, if you look at the timeline of slavery going over thousands of years, white people didn't really enter the game, until the later 1500s, and so there, if we look at the timeline of slavery, the white participation in slavery is around 2%, 2% of the total timeline. So very small, and yet of the literature about slavery, it's in exact reverse to the reality. 98% of all literature about slavery focuses only on white people as the slavers. There's hardly any information about Arab slavery and Berber slavery and blacks enslaving each other and the culture of slavery in Africa. Africa had an interesting sort of culture that really slavery was the go-to for anything and everything. And this idea that it was a white construct or something is just is utterly absurd. But if you look at the propaganda representation of slavery today, it's depicted as a uniquely white thing, and uniquely enslaving black people, and only white people did it, and so on and so forth. So you stop the average person in the street or average high school kid and you ask about, and I have, by the way, got friends that have got kids in senior high school, and you just ask a few Oh, how's it going? Have you done anything on slavery? Oh, yeah, evil white fascist Nazis. And straight away it comes out as a reflex response. They're not even a reasoned response, a response of reason, saying, well, actually, I've read widely on this, and I do understand that the Arabs were in fact the big players in slavery, and that the blacks enslaved each other, sold it to the white people, and so on. Yeah. No, none of that. No nuance, nothing at all. Evil white person, oppressed black person. That's it. End of story. Nothing to talk about. So it's depicted in this sort of Marxist oppressed type paradigm. Now, what the globalists have done, and it's been a premeditated sort of orchestrated exercise here, is in the European countries that have had that were engaged even directly or indirectly in slavery, or where they had colonies where black people were in the colonies, say colonies in Africa, that sort of thing. They're the countries that have been really targeted for this slavery, shaming type propaganda, and it's a very concerted effort. Again, exquisitely well funded. I mean, the resources available to it are endless, going right through the public service, academia, wherever the globalists have control. They've run this systems through. But I just want to sort of have when you look at and have a look at the channel if you haven't already. Called History Debunked, and they've done some quite good, or the guy who does that has done some quite good videos on and explanations of the lies and the untruths that are told in not simply slavery, but the shoehorning of fake black history into European history or British history. It's all a pack of lies, but it goes on apace. Now, what they've done in places like England and France and so on is, the former sort of colonial type powers. What they've done is they've created black activists to produce, endless histories of supposed alleged histories about, the oppression of blacks, and the blacks have always played the prominent role in Western societies, going way back to the Romans or even earlier than that. So now here's one here. This is now you've got people like David Olusoga and Renaud Edo Lodge in Britain. And if you pick up their books, and it isn't hard to see, well, why are they making such claims? Now they're doing, whether it be through omission on one hand or through misrepresentation on another, or in an organised system of round robin quoting. So you get one flaky, African activist, black activist, to say, well, black people invented the wheel and the spaceships to the rockets to the moon. Black people. So then the next black activist can quote that one. And if they're caught up and say, well, look, it wasn't me, he said it. I'm only quoting him. And so they do this round robin. This is a very leftist way of legitimizing lies, is you get one person to say it and then everyone else quotes that person. But then by the time it's gone through the circuit, a few times, then it's become fact, even though the original quote was absolute nonsense. So I'm looking here. Now, here's a lady who's, these how implausible these people are that are used to spread the propaganda. Here's a black lady. She's born in Africa, and she then moves to a European country and is she has only 2 or 3 years of education, but somehow she's gifted a high school graduation and is given an affirmative action position in college, which she's doing full time. Now, at this time, she's claiming to be a single mother with 2 children from 2 different itinerant fathers. I mean, she's not collecting, masses of child support for some rich Hollywood movie star or something. So the inference is that she's not getting any money from them, but she's somehow managing to be a full-time student at a prestigious university here. So she's waved into that. She then gets a degree. This is somebody who doesn't even speak the language, but somehow she manages to get a degree. Now she's got a couple of interviews online, which I've looked at, and she sounds like every bit the unsophisticated, low IQ peasant. But she gets the degree. Then she gets a scholarship and goes on to university. Either goes back or goes on in university, where she gets a master's, and then she continues again on somehow she gets another scholarship and she gets a PhD. Now, how she gets these things is quite beyond me, but the white taxpayer, has paid it all. And now through this time, she's also getting book publishing deals. Where she is writing about Black history, how hard it is to be a single mother in the midst of all this evil, wicked Nazi fascist oppression. So she's being gifted a citizenship in a white country. She comes from Africa, gifted citizenship. She's being, even though she has no skills, doesn't speak the language, no qualifications, she's somehow gifted a citizenship. Then she's gifted a place at university and paid to do it, given a scholarship. I don't know what the terms of the scholarship were, but she doesn't have to work or doesn't mention any work anyway. So she's being very well looked after by the white country and the white taxpayer, while all the time screaming about racism and fascists and Nazis are everywhere, holding her back, preventing Black people, oppressing Black people, oppressing them, forcing them to the ground, rubbing their faces in the dirt. Evil fascist Nazis. So these evil fascist Nazis are looking after her very, very well. But still she complains. She then gets the PhD. She then is gifted a role as a professor of history at a third or fourth tier, I guess you'd call it, university. But she then was given another publishing deal about how she's the first Black single mother to get a chair of professorship. That's right, she's the chair of, so to get the chair of professorship at a university. Now, it's hard to imagine someone less deserving of those accolades and so on. But she's hailed as being this great knowledgeable voice about Black history and about the role of Blacks in white Western society, and how they're all wickedly oppressed by these fascist Nazi whites. And now, she gets she's interviewed on channels that are very left leaning, and interviewed in news media outlets like The Guardian or the British BBC, that sort of stuff. So, and they very soft interviews so she can make. And Black people are so oppressed. Did you know that the Black people of the Western Europe are murdered 100 times over by fascist Nazis? And that, she can say those things. The interviewer will just nod, and the interview carries right on. So, but as a propaganda outlet, she and others, by the way, really just they've been constructed. You could have made them in a factory out the back, along with the David Olusogas and all these sort of people. Olivet Otelli is another one, and the list just goes on of these people who quite shamelessly are pushing the propaganda of Black activism for the sole purpose of shaming white people and shaming white society and creating social division and so on. Can you imagine? Just consider the absurdity of this. Globalist policy is to willfully insert as many Black people as they can into white society, and then force the white society to get on their knees and beg forgiveness for their racism. Can you imagine that? I mean, just think about the idiocy and the the malice in the construct of doing things that way. But that's what the globalists are doing. So, again, the book publishers are making no effort whatsoever to fact check or anything of that sort. In fact, the more outrageous the lie and the misrepresentation, the more they seem to delight over it. Now, as someone that's put up a few books for publishing myself, I know how serious the fact checkers are. and how you have to make a full declaration that this is fiction or non-fiction and so on. So they certainly go over it in a big way if you're a straight white male, I guess. But if you're not, then you can really say any lie provided it's against white people, and this would appear to be the case, or not appear to be, it is the case here. Now, I don't understand why they don't correct obvious, blatant untruths. And some of the references that are, I mean, just looking at one like half an hour or so ago, where the references that were made to a particular assertion with some radical Marxist journal, that where even the author of that said that it appears that such and such. And that was supposed to be the reference quote for justifying an even more outrageous assertion by this radical black activist. But make no mistake, none of these activists would have got out of junior high school on any form of merit. They've been handpicked as activists, handpicked as propaganda mouthpieces, and handpicked as the authority. Now, amongst the black populace, they're believed, did you know that all black people have been murdered 1,000,000 times over in just the last 1 second? Yeah, and this is enough for the black diaspora to get ginned up and get all excited. And there doesn't need to be any facts. There's no pushback from the body politic. Imagine a white person getting up and saying these sorts of things. They'd be roundly condemned by the entire body politic. The entire media establishment would be after it. They'd be running for cover given the attacks from all sides. But if a black person tells the most outrageous lies, that's the propaganda they want. That's protected. So it's not just protecting a protected class, it's protecting the lies and the propaganda they're putting out. And provided it's anti-white, then that's the gig. That's the gig. The gig is to produce as much anti-white propaganda as they can get out there and get away with. But there's no pushback from anywhere. You have a few small social media channels pushing back, and even there, they're being demonetized, and they're receiving every discouragement that the globalist cabal can throw at them for doing this. So that's my take on that. We need to understand that these people, these low IQ hacks and goons, have been specifically promoted only because of their ability to relate to the diaspora they're trying to gin up, and there's no other purpose for them being there. And they're just all over the place now. But again, they've been manufactured at the back for the sole purpose of creating social division. You've been with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.